Generally, dive planning has 4 stages. Advanced planning is the decision to go diving. You decide on a buddy, choose a dive site, agree on an objective, schedule logistics, and generally check dive conditions, as well as weather, surf, tides, and so on. Start preparation planning a day or more before you go. Inspect your gear and have your cylinder filled if necessary. Recheck conditions if it has been several days since you last checked, and start packing your gear as appropriate. Last-minute preparation is what you do right before you head out. Recheck conditions if appropriate for last-minute changes. Let someone know where you're going, including when you expect to return, what to do if you're late, and your mobile number. Gather personal items that you want with you, like your certification card, sunscreen, smartphone or tablet, beverages, and so on. Pack your gear bag with anything left remaining, and double-check that you're not forgetting anything. Pre-dive planning is the actual dive plan based on what you find at the site. You want to anticipate, discuss, and plan for as much as reasonably possible. Evaluate whether conditions are acceptable. Take as much time as you need. If not, find another site or cancel the dive. Agree on techniques, including where and how to enter and exit in your course. Review signals and communications as needed. Agree on buddy separation procedures and on time, depth, and air supply limits. You should also discuss what to do if an emergency arises. The dive planning slate has prompts to help you with pre-dive planning. Diving's safety record is better than many other sports and activities, but it still has hazards and risks. You can't breathe water, so common sense tells us that being in and underwater presents some hazards and risks. And you've learned some of the risks associated with breathing compressed air. Much of what you learn as a new diver helps you reduce and manage risk. But like most things in life, you can't eliminate it entirely. To reduce the likelihood of problems, dive within your limits. Stay fit and keep your skills sharp. Follow safe diving guidelines, have the recommended equipment, and do as you've been trained, even when it doesn't seem necessary. Remember that under stress, you tend to do what you do by habit, so maintain habits that help you prevent and deal with problems. You're human, so you will make mistakes. Following proper procedures and having required equipment helps offset this by providing a margin for error. With proper diving habits and equipment, you'll have fewer problems, and the ones you do have will usually be small. You'll be better prepared to handle problems quickly and effectively. The next subsection introduces you to basic problem management. But consider that continuing your diver education expands and refines what you'll learn in this course. For instance, it's recommended that you complete the PADI Rescue Diver and Emergency Oxygen Provider courses, as well as Emergency First Response primary and secondary care training, especially if you plan to dive away from immediate assistance by paramedics, lifeguards, and professional dive guides. Most diver in distress situations occur at the surface. You can prevent or control most of these by doing what you've been taught, diving within your limits, relaxing while you dive, and establishing and maintaining positive buoyancy when you're on the surface. If you have a problem on the surface, immediately make yourself buoyant, inflate your BCD, or drop your weights. Stop, think, and then act. Ask for help if you need it. That often avoids a small problem becoming a big one. If you need to help a diver at the surface, you have to recognize that he needs help and his state of mind. Divers who are in control, not panicked, usually signal or ask for assistance. They appear relatively relaxed and move with controlled, deliberate actions. They usually respond to and follow instructions, keep their gear in place, and make themselves buoyant. Divers out of control, panicked, act instinctively out of fear instead of using deliberate, controlled actions based on their training. They will struggle violently and expend tremendous energy staying at the surface, even until becoming exhausted. They typically don't establish buoyancy, but will climb on anything or anyone to keep from sinking. They reject their masks and mouthpieces, have wide, unseeing eyes, don't follow instructions, and have quick, jerky movements. Panicked divers need immediate help because they may struggle until exhausted, then be at risk of sinking and drowning. Follow 4 steps when you help another diver. First, establish buoyancy for yourself and the diver. Ideally, throw or extend something that floats. If you must make contact to help, first make yourself buoyant, then inflate his BCD or drop his weights. Second, calm the diver by reassuring him. And third, help the diver establish breathing control. Have him breathe slowly and deeply to encourage relaxation. If possible and appropriate, give him a chance to recover before doing anything else. Finally, assist the diver to the boat or shore. Even divers in control may need help due to leg cramps or other problems. You'll practice diver toes during training. An unresponsive diver at the surface may have inhaled water, blacked out due to fatigue and exhaustion, had a heart attack, suffered a lung overexpansion injury, or have some other serious condition. He needs immediate help. The primary concerns are to check for breathing and to begin rescue breathing if it's needed. A diver who's floating face down at the surface may be resting or watching what's underwater, but he could be unresponsive. Good buddy communication avoids confusion, but check responsiveness if a diver floats motionless like this for more than a few moments. Assume a diver who floats in an odd position or who panics and then stops moving to be unresponsive. To assist an unresponsive diver, establish buoyancy for yourself and the victim. Call for help to the boat or shore. Check for breathing and provide rescue breathing if he's not breathing. Finally, get the victim out of the water while continuing rescue breaths if they're needed. We'll look at what you do after you get out shortly. Again, you prevent or control most underwater problems by doing what you've been learning. Relax while you dive. Plan your air use with your buddy and watch it closely. And dive within your experience and training limits. You've learned about overexertion previously, but let's review it because it's a common underwater problem. You help prevent overexertion by staying relaxed, breathing slowly and deeply. Avoid strenuous activity. If you start to overexert, you may feel air-starved if you demand air faster than your regulator can supply it. If it happens, don't ignore the feeling. Remember that you stop, hang on to something that you wouldn't harm if you can, like a piece of dead coral in this case. Relax, breathe slowly until you catch your breath, then continue at a reduced pace, or abort the dive if necessary. Your scuba regulator is designed so that if it fails, it free flows like this, rather than cutting off your air. You can breathe from a free-flowing regulator, but don't seal your mouth on it, partly because there's some risk of lung overexpansion injury if the flow's high, but mainly because it may come out of your mouth or flood your mask. Instead, press it to the outside of your lips like this, letting the excess escape. Insert one end of the mouthpiece if it helps, then breathe the air you need by sipping it from the flow, somewhat like drinking from a water fountain. Start up promptly because a free flow will exhaust your air supply quickly, but ascend at a safe rate. Obviously, have the regulator professionally serviced before using it again. You'll practice this skill during Confined Water Dive 4. In the aquatic plant discussion, You learn that entanglement is rare. Fishing line, loose line off a reel, and old fishing nets can entangle, but you can usually avoid the problem by moving slowly, being alert, watching where you're going, and keeping your kit streamlined. If you do get entangled, it's not usually an emergency if you have adequate air. Don't turn or twist. That wraps line around you. Stop, think, and then calmly and slowly disentangle yourself. Get your buddy to help, and if you're severely entangled or low on air, carefully use your cutting tool if that's faster. In rare, extreme cases, you may have to slip out of your scuba kit to clear it, which you'll practice during your confined water training dives. You've already learned a lot about low air and out-of-air situations. Planning air use, including a reserve and watching your SPG, usually prevents them. Always head up while you still have enough air for a proper ascent. It's better to have a long surface swim than to run out of air underwater. In the event of an out-of-air situation, you have 4 options. 1 is to make a normal ascent when you still have some air but feel significant breathing resistance. You get more air as the surrounding pressure drops, so breathe lightly and make a controlled, continuous ascent, no safety stop, to the surface. An alternate air source ascent is your best all-around choice. You're already familiar with this and you practice it many times during training. If you're not as close to your buddy as you should be, have no independent alternate air source, and are 6 to 9 meters or 20 to 30 feet or shallower, a controlled emergency swimming ascent, or CESA, is another response. Simply look up and swim to the surface, making an ah sound to assure that you exhale to avoid lung overexpansion injury. You will learn this first by swimming horizontally in confined water with your instructor. Ascend at a safe rate. Keep your regulator in your mouth and keep all your gear in place. You'll learn more in the Your Skills as a Diver section. You would use a buoyant emergency ascent if you were too far from your buddy, had no other alternate air source, and were so deep that you don't think you'd make it to the surface any other way. Ascend just as in a controlled emergency swimming ascent, except drop your weights. You'll exceed a safe ascent rate, but that's better than staying on the bottom. Make an ah sound and flare out your arms and legs as you near the surface to slow down. When you reach the surface in any out-of-air situation, your low-pressure inflator won't work. If necessary, establish buoyancy by dropping your weights or inflate your BCD orally. An unresponsive diver underwater is a serious emergency. The priority is to get the victim to the surface. Use her BCD or drop her weights if necessary. Hold her regulator in if it's in place, but if not, don't waste time putting it back. Ascend at a safe rate, keeping yourself safe because you can't help someone if you're in trouble. If you lose control of the victim, let her rise to the surface ahead of you. At the surface, follow the procedures you saw earlier. Unresponsiveness is unconsciousness or being unable to respond or act coherently. Near drowning, pressure-related injuries, and medical conditions like a heart attack can cause difficulty breathing, unconsciousness, unclear thinking, visual problems, paralysis, chest pain, lowered alertness, cardiac and respiratory arrest. Once out of the water, your priorities for helping someone who is or was unresponsive are: assure breathing. Keep the airway open. Continually monitor breathing. Provide CPR if necessary. Contact emergency care. First, the local emergency medical system, then the local diver emergency service like the Divers Alert Network if there is one for the area. Keep a breathing, unresponsive diver lying level with his left side down. If the victim becomes responsive, keep him lying down. Administer emergency oxygen and maintain his temperature by protecting him from heat or cold. Continue providing care until emergency medical help arrives. If you can't accompany the diver to medical care, write down as much information about the dive and the diver as possible. This isn't an accident report, so provide only information like the dive profile, the emergency care provided, emergency contact information, and known medical conditions. Write only facts. Don't speculate or guess. Anyone who has been unresponsive underwater or in water should have a medical examination. Some conditions, like near drowning, can have serious delayed effects that are potentially fatal. These can occur more than 24 hours later, even in someone who appears fully recovered. Let's look at your options for surface signaling devices. You should have at least two: an audible device that attracts attention with noise, and a visual device that makes it easier to see you from a distance. Whistles are the most common audible devices. Attach yours here, where it's out of the way but easy to use in an emergency. Low-pressure horns use your cylinder air. They're very loud, but have a regular whistle too in case your cylinder's empty. Inflatable signal tubes fit in your pocket, yet stand a meter or 3 feet or more out of the water when deployed. They make it much easier to see you, especially in rough conditions. Delayed surface marker buoys, DSMBs, do the same job. The main difference is that you can deploy them from underwater. Signal mirrors get attention by reflecting the sun. They're useful for signaling aircraft as well as boats. Signal lights and flashers designed for diving are good options for night diving. You may use a dive float when shore diving, or when going some distance from a boat. Dive floats give you something to rest on, mark dive sites, help carry accessories, provide emergency flotation, and support dive flags. The best type depends on what uses you have in mind. Tow a dive float with line on a proper reel. Loose line poses an entanglement hazard. Tow by hand so you simply let go if a boat or something entangles the line. Dive flags alert boaters and other watercraft to your presence. The traditional dive flag indicates that divers are below and boats should stay clear. Many areas require it when diving in navigable waters. The alpha flag indicates that a vessel has divers in the water and can't maneuver. Generally, it is only required to be used by boats, but some regions use it for all diving activities and fly them from the surface floats. Some areas require both flags. Your instructor will tell you which applies where you're diving. Fly a flag so it's visible from at least 100 meters or yards. Local laws may stipulate how close you have to stay to it and how far boaters must stay away. If not, the general rule is for divers to stay within 15 meters or 50 feet and boaters to stay 30 to 60 meters or 100 to 200 feet. Don't assume every boater recognizes dive flags. If a boat sounds loud and close, stay deep enough to be safe until it passes. You've seen several entries you may learn during the course. Another you may learn is the seated back roll. It's useful from small boats and swim steps that are close to the water. After your pre-dive safety check, sit at the edge, facing away from the water with your cylinder out over the surface, like this. Partially inflate your BCD. Breathe from your regulator and hold your mask. After your buddy confirms the area is clear, tuck your chin and lean back until your weight naturally rolls you in. Hold your mask until you bob back up. Then signal you're okay and clear the area for your buddy's entry. Besides dropping weights in an emergency, you need to be able to remove and replace your weights to make adjustments or for some entry and exit methods. Your instructor will show you the appropriate technique for your equipment, but here are some points that may apply to most systems. When removing weights, be careful not to drop them. Your buddy may help you, or you may hand them to a boat crew or someone on a dock. Before donning weights in the water, be sure you have ample buoyancy, and you may want to switch from snorkel to regulator so you can breathe in any position as you position the weight. With many weight-integrated BCDs, it helps to turn face up so the pouches slide into place, but this varies. Using a weight belt, hold the free end so weights don't slip off the end, and replace it with the loop method, like this. Cramps are painful involuntary muscle contractions. In diving, they're most common in the feet and legs. If you get a cramp, stop, signal your buddy, and let the muscle rest. Gently stretch and massage the muscle. Use your fin, like this. If your buddy has a cramp, you can help by giving her something to press against, like this. Wait a few minutes after the cramp subsides before continuing at a slower pace. After learning basic buoyancy control, the next level is hovering. Establish neutral buoyancy, then gently push off the bottom, like this. You should hover without using your hands and fins, rising and sinking a bit as you inhale and exhale. You can control your position a bit by slightly raising or lowering how deeply you breathe, but don't hold your breath. It may take some practice to get the knack. Your instructor will have you work on this until you can hover for at least 30 seconds. After you're properly weighted and neutrally buoyant, you check and adjust your trim, your balance in the water. With your buddy, swim slowly in midwater. Pause and relax to see how your body wants to orient itself. Ideally, you want to trim yourself so you tend to stay in a relatively horizontal, face-down position, like this. If your feet rise or sink significantly, or if you roll face up, your instructor will help you reposition your weight and gear for a better trim. This is something you'll gradually learn to adjust from one dive to the next. The Peak Performance Buoyancy course further refines these skills beyond what you master in this course. Ask your instructor or visit PADI.com for more information. Once you've experienced air depletion and practiced alternate air source use, you'll put them together. When it becomes hard to breathe after your instructor closes the valve, signal for air. Secure your buddy's alternate air source and switch to it. Your instructor will reopen your valve so you can use your own if you need to for some reason. After a few breaths and getting settled, swim with your buddy for at least a minute sharing air. This gives you practice in sharing air and staying together while swimming for about as long as it might typically take to reach the surface in a real emergency. Your instructor will have you finish by actually ascending to the surface. Orally inflate your BCD to simulate not having air for low-pressure inflation. Keep using the alternate air source until you're buoyant. You'll begin practicing the Controlled Emergency Swimming Ascent, or CESA, in Confined Water Dive 3. Previously, you learned that you simply look up, reach up, and swim up, making an ah sound. Keep all your gear in place. Since confined water isn't very deep, you'll do this with your instructor horizontally. So for practice, as you swim horizontally, think of ahead as up. Your instructor will be beside or beneath you and signal when to start. Reach out and look ahead and make a steady ah sound as you swim at 18 meters or 60 feet per minute. Don't rush. You should be able to go at least 9 meters or 30 feet. After you've mastered this in confined water, you'll get to practice in open water with your instructor using a line for safety and control.